Morning. Find your team, yeah. Tulsa folks, can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Give you a view of the scene here. Well,
Nice. I assume you're in OKC.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll get you guys. This is the first time we've done like OKC and Tulsa together. And so we'll figure out how to make sure someone's there to be able to let you guys meet in person Saturday. So we'll figure that out real quick and get you guys. We've got a place already for you all to meet at GetWit. If you're familiar with GetWit in Tulsa.
I'm familiar with it just because of the calendar invite. I think it's like down in downtown Tulsa.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. So just bear with us. Morning. Good. Yeah. All right, welcome. Let's get started. This is amazing. There's so many of you. Glad you all found it okay. I won't have the signs out next week. Hopefully you remember how to get here now. Yeah, welcome. So we didn't get through all of just kind of the level setting and just like what are the expectations and stuff like that. So I want to finish that before we jump into learning HTML today. How did the homework go? Good. Okay. What? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. So feel free to, if you can't see the screen well enough, I can zoom in more, but also feel free to just join the Zoom on your computer if you want to just watch the screen share from your computer. If you have questions or anything, you can just interrupt me. Or you can post in Slack and the mentors will be monitoring it and we can pause class if we need to for any questions. If we're doing something and you don't want to interrupt the class because like something's going wrong with your computer or something like that, just raise your hand and a mentor can come and help you out. Okay. So we are learning how to make full stack web apps. There's a lot of different ways that you interact with software. By far the most popular way though is through your web browser. And typically nowadays we are interacting with web applications. So it used to be you would interact with a website, and the website would just have content for you to read. But now we typically are logging in. We are like interacting with the page. The content is unique to us or generated for us specifically. And it's much more complicated than just a basic website. So that's typically called a web app, something like that. So I have some examples here. All of these things you can get to through your browser. You also might get to them on your TV, or you might get to them on your phone as an installed application. But those are typically different than a web app. Like we would refer to, if you were using Slack on your phone, that would be a native app because it's like an actual, it's like a totally different setup. It's different code. It's a different language typically. to create it. If you're using Slack on your desktop, that's usually like like if it's installed, that's like a desktop app installed on Mac OS. Whereas if you're doing it through your web browser, that's a web app. You're visiting something through your browser. And it's written typically in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's what we're learning today. And web apps are by far the most popular, ubiquitous way that you typically are interacting with software online. Now, what do I mean by full stack? Yeah, it's going to turn off in a second. Yeah. Yes, it is. When we get to the summer classes, I usually come and like get it real cool first so that it's not on during class. Sorry, what was I about to say? Oh yeah, full stack. So does anybody know, has anyone heard that term, full stack? And do you know like what makes up that term? Like if you're full stack, you do
Being
what?
able to do front end and back end.
Yes. So full stack means you can do front end and back end. You don't have to do both. You can specialize if you want to. So you could become a front end developer if you wanted to and just focus on that, or you could be a back end developer and just focus on that as well. Or you can choose to be full stack. It doesn't, you're not like better by being any one of those three. We're learning full stack just to get a taste of all of it. So then you can decide what you're most interested in, whether it's both or just one or the other. So front end is you're making what people see. You're making the visual page that you're interacting with. Whereas back end is a lot of the like algorithms and data processing and just like logistical stuff that happens in the back end to make the application do something fancy. So if you think of like Uber, for example, you request a ride by clicking a button in the app, but then there's a very complicated algorithm going on in the back. Hey, sorry, I think
You're back.
for a second. What was the last thing you guys heard?
Uber.
You
Yeah,
cut out
Uber.
at algorithm on in the back. That's what
Yeah.
I heard.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was it. So I just asked if there was any questions about any of that stuff that I just mentioned. Okay. All right, so what are we learning? So module 1, we're focusing on just the foundation of being able to make content for a page. So this like the first module is very front end focused. There's no back end in this first module. So you're learning HTML and CSS, which is simply like the visual part of a web page. And it's really not much of a web app at this point. You're mainly like in the realm of making just like static websites that have content that you can look at. We'll then go to module 2, which is where you're going to be introed into JavaScript, which really it's an intro to programming. So we're learning the fundamentals of programming, and the language we're using is JavaScript. That's going to allow us to start doing more dynamic things on web pages. So when you introduce JavaScript to a web page, it allows you to do more interaction and to make it more dynamic. So, users can click buttons, and when they click the button, you can then do something with the information they gave you, or you can, change the web page, you can have them log in. It's when you start really getting into the realm of web apps. Learning to program is a lot though, so it's actually 2 modules. So module 3 is just a continued learning of JavaScript, and learning more and more about the fundamentals of programming. Then we get to most people's favorite module, module 4, where you start to learn React, which is pretty much the most common way to build a web app nowadays. So it just makes it's a framework that most people use that make it really easy to quickly make a web application in terms of the front end part of it, not the back end part of it. Then we go to module 5, where we start learning backend programming. Next.js is kind of actually a full stack framework. It includes both React and the API part of a web application. The API being the thing you interact with to get and send data, and then to do like data processing. So you also are dealing with a database, which is MongoDB is the database that we use. So that is all the curriculum, modules 1 through 5. Module 6 is a capstone, and that's where you'll be working with your teams to build whatever it is you want to build. So you'll get to kind of propose different ideas of what sounds interesting to you, and then your team will vote on which one they want to work on, and then you'll build that thing together. So last year, I have some examples of what they built last year in the capstone. There was a recipe application that was built. There was a Trello clone where, you could drag and drop different tasks based on the stage they're in. There was like a plant application, like keeping track of plants and knowing when to water them and things like that. And then there was also a diet application. So pretty much whatever you want to build, you'll a very prototype, simple version of it we'll tackle in the capstone. That heat's still going. Sorry. Yeah. I think we could maybe just turn it off if that's a setting. Okay, any questions? Cool. All right, we covered this last time, but there's kind of a cycle here. So there's the 6 modules is sort of the larger cycle. But within that, we have sort of a 2-week learning cycle. There's 8 classes, right? So Wednesday and Saturday for 4 weeks. And we do a lecture, and then here's where we are right now. We're on the 2-hour Saturday lecture. And then we'll have Wednesday lecture again. And then Saturday will be a team day where we're going to have an exercise that you'll be working on with your team. Pair programming is a very popular thing within this industry. So just being a coder that's on your own, just cranking away all day is not typically how we work. Yes. Can you guys still hear me okay on the call? Okay. That is amazingly better. Wow. Okay. So pairing is a very common practice. So having a person sort of drive, like do the coding, and another person sit with you and think through the problem and decide what to code, and then switching is very common. And it's a great way to learn. And so like it's not just something that we do as a beginner, it's something we do forever. So I still pair with people just to make sure that you're always kind of seeing new things from a new perspective from other people. So that's the cycle that we follow. And yeah.
Saturday's 3 hours? Is that?
Yeah, so we'll typically go over 2 hours. You don't have to stay if you can't. Yeah, typically, yeah. Okay, so expectations. So everyone here is an adult, and you're paying for it. And so my expectation is like you're here because you want to be, and that you'll be self-motivated. We're not going to do anything where it's like checking attendance or checking your homework and stuff like that. If you're not coming, you would stop paying, I would presume. And so the reason for that is not just because you're adults, it's because this is a really hard industry and coding is very difficult, and you have to be self-motivated to succeed. And you have to really like it. So like if you're not enjoying yourself, if there's not some sort of like tingling happening while you're coding, then that's okay. It's not for everybody. And if you're having a hard time, now it's going to be hard. And like, just because you like it doesn't mean that that's going to get you through this. There's like, I have been coding for a long time. And when I took OK Coders, there was a period where I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Like, I just don't think it's going to work out. And it did. So there's going to be a low point, just like anything you learn. But you should, throughout the whole thing, you should feel some sort of interest and you should feel some sort of enjoyment from doing it. So that's really important. If you don't have that, that's okay. All right. And then, so just make sure to always check Slack. Like all communication is through Slack. So just always check Slack like before class and stuff like that, just to make sure there's no updates. And then, so OK Coders is a part of Techlahoma. Techlahoma is like the nonprofit tech thing of Oklahoma. It's great to be involved in. There's a ton of events and things like that. Emily runs Techlahoma. So just make sure you're in the Techlahoma Slack. So just notice what else is going on in the other channels and try to participate if you can. And last, so AI is like really changed all of our lives, as we saw with our team name generation stuff. It's really, really impacted coding. So you've all used ChatGPT, I'm sure. Just so you know, it can like code really well. So like it can like write code. And which is amazing. And what like we use that a lot now in the industry. Like as we're writing code, like there's like an integrated thing in VS Code called Copilot that will just like finish what you're doing. And it's awesome. There's two ways that you can use AI. Or I mean, there's a lot of ways you can use it, but two ways to kind of think about how to use it. And one of them we want to discourage for this course. So one is using it to learn, which like it's incredibly useful for that. Like we used to have so much chatter in Slack of people asking questions that they were getting stuck on, that now like if you just ask ChatGPT, it's usually a better answer than a mentor can provide, and it's like immediate. So it's like ask it things all the time about coding, and it will give you it's going to be correct too. Like there's not a lot of hallucination because code is like very correct or not. And it knows it really well. So ask it questions all the time. I would discourage having it write code for you though, at the moment. Like, so if we're going to do an exercise today of like trying to recreate a Wikipedia page, like you could just ask ChatGPT to write the code for that exercise. But I would encourage you to try it yourself first and give it your full effort. And then once you get stuck or you want to see how it does it, then go ask it to do it. And then try as hard as you can to understand what it output for you. Because if you just ask it to do stuff for you and you don't understand what it's doing, then you're not learning anything. So does that make sense? There's any questions about that? Okay. Cool. And what can you expect from us? So we're trying to connect you to people. So seems like everyone's getting to know everyone quite well, so that's good. And we want to connect you to professionals. We want to connect you to the community. And so that's one thing we'll do. Connect you to other learners. We're doing good there. And then provide structure to all this online stuff. So there's a ton of resources online, and we're just trying to kind of guide you through those things. And then really what this boot camp is about is to help you figure out if you like coding or not. And this is a part-time boot camp, and it's not like a $30,000 full-time boot camp. Those things try to guarantee that you'll get a job after them. We're not guaranteeing that or anything like that. This is part-time. So some people do get jobs right after this boot camp, but it's exceptional people that like really put in a ton of time outside of class. So like if you're not putting time in outside of class, like it's definitely not going to happen. But we if you get through this, if you get through the 6 months, there's probably another 6 months of trying to kind of figure out what your next step is that's tailored right for you. Some people go do a full-time boot camp. Some people just keep studying for a while until they land an internship or a job. Some of you might not even want to transition into coding. You're just trying to learn more about it within your current position. So whatever you're trying to do after this, just make sure to talk to one of us about it, and we can give you specific tailored advice to what you're trying to accomplish. Okay. I think that's everything. All right. So I'll start jumping into some of the curriculum for today. Is there any questions before? Is there any like sort of like logistical stuff or like how the class is going to work or any other questions like that? Okay, if you're just being shy, just post in Slack whenever you feel like you've got the ability to do so.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
As far as working with teams go, I think Wednesday it was mentioned that we might look into making Tulsa specific teams. That just seems a little more logistically feasible. No offense to my team, you guys are great. I just
Which
think it
team are
might
you
be.
on? Certainly not Hack Street Boys.
No, we're in code code troopers.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should do that. So if you're in Tulsa, that's your team now. We'll we'll make a channel for everyone that's in Tulsa. And I'll be making sure that we make channels at the end of class today. We'll get everyone set up in their channels at the end of class. So yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I think it's a good idea. All right, let's get started.
There was a question in chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please, if there is something in chat, like I usually like am not monitoring it, so just bring it up. Oh yeah, good question. So yes, every class is recorded. And it'll like auto post itself in Slack afterwards. So you'll everything you need should be in Slack. So I'll post homework in Slack, and then the lectures will get posted in Slack, so you can rewatch them if you need to. And then everything, all the like curriculum that we're doing is in GitHub. So you can reference like whatever I do in class on GitHub, and I'll kind of walk you guys through the structure of GitHub today. Yeah, well, yeah, it's complicated to use GitHub, so I'll be showing that. Cool. Okay. All right, so everyone should have VS Code installed. So if you don't have that, get that. And VS Code is like a code editor, and there used to be a lot of other code editors. There used to be like a ton of people like would use their own flavor. VS Code is kind of taken over. It's very popular. Most people use it now. So it's what I use like every day. It's the main tool that I use when I code. And so this is like if you know Figma, like a designer uses Figma every day, like VS Code is the equivalent of that for coding. So if you're a web developer, you pretty much use VS Code and then your browser. Those are your two primary tools that you're interacting with. And so that's all we need for now. And that'll last us until we have to start doing stuff in the terminal, which will happen when we get to the cool black fancy screen that people type and hack into. That's what we'll get to when we do the backend class. But there's actually a built-in terminal in VS Code as well, so a lot of people use that. Okay, so you should have VS Code. Now it's important that, so I have VS Code open right now, and notice like I'm like somewhere. I'm like at a location in my computer, which is this like curriculum folder thing. So curriculum is a folder on my computer that I opened in VS Code, and then I've got like files and folders that I can see on the left that I can explore and open. So like if you're a coder, you're just like opening a bunch of different text files and then changing the text within the files and then saving them. That's what we do. And so this is just a file explorer over here. So, oh, shoot. So whenever you are doing something, you have to be doing it somewhere on your computer, like the files on your computer somewhere. So let me if you're not asking a question, make sure you're muted on the. Make sure you're muted. Okay. So here's my file explorer, right? So if you're on Windows computer or Mac, hold on 1 second. You've got your, oh shoot. Sorry, there's all this like Zoom stuff that I'm trying to move. If you can see my mouse doing weird stuff. So if you're on on your Mac or Windows computer, you've got kind of your documents and desktop and stuff like that. Most coders will put a folder at their, so this is like my home directory, where my username is. Most people will make like a projects or code folder there. So go ahead and do that. So you can see I have a code folder. And then within that, I have like usually different like companies that I'm working on, or like certain groupings or whatever. So you can see I've got a GitWid folder, which is where I work, and then an OK Coders folder. So for you guys, I would make an OK Coders folder as well within your code folder.
So when does you sound like root C?
Yeah, on Windows, you probably not root C, but like you should have a username within root C within there. Yeah. No, that'd be fine. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't matter where you put it. The only reason I'm putting it up at the top is just because it's easier to get there when we're navigating from the terminal. So you can actually move around on your computer on the terminal. And so you just want to be able to get to that folder really quickly. Are you on a Mac? So do Shift Command H. That'll take you home. So that's your home folder. And you have like desktop and documents and stuff on the left there, you see? Those are like the shortcuts to that thing. So if you just want to put it in documents, that's fine. If you just want to be able to get to it fast. So wherever you like normally put stuff, put the code there too. You can I think you can like drag it over to the left and like have it you see how I have code is like in my favorites. Yeah, so I think you can just like drag a folder there. Yeah. So yeah, have a code folder or whatever you want to call it, and then an OK Coders folder, and then you can decide how you want to kind of organize your stuff. You can put all your code in one folder. You can make a folder for each class. it's really up to you. So I have the curriculum folder, which has this stuff in it. GitHub is just a mirror of a folder. Like it's just where you save a folder. And within it is code. So I have this curriculum folder. This is the curriculum GitHub. It's like linked to it. So when I change stuff here, I can sync it with what's in GitHub. And then in Slack, I always try to make sure that the useful stuff is at the top here. So here's the Zoom for class. Here's the GitHub. So notice like I have a GitHub. No, not now. Shoot. Okay. So OK Coders curriculum, you can see like this is just files and folders with files in the folders. And like there's a README here, right? And that's the same thing that's right here. So it's just like where we store file, basically. So it's like a OneDrive, but for coders. And then all of our curriculum will show up here over time. So if you want to like look ahead, you can go to the archive and look at like last year's or the year before. But as we progress, I'll continue to add more and more folders. So module 1 is here, and then day 1 is there. And you can see here's the deck linked from it. And then day 2 is today. And so here's what we're doing today. So if you need to reference anything, you can just go to the GitHub and find the day that you are wanting to look at stuff from. Yeah. Do we have Wi-Fi? Yeah, so there's the Verge guest. Yeah. Is everybody connected to that okay? That tried? Okay. Okay, so you should have a folder somewhere. And then basically you just want to open VS Code at that folder. So if you just open VS Code like without doing anything, you get sort of this like blank welcome screen. The first thing you want to do typically whenever you do this is go to File, Open Folder, and then find the folder where you want to be working. So it could be, if you made an OK Coders folder, it could be that one. So I'm going to go to Code, OK Coders, Curriculum. That's the folder I want to use today. And I'll hit Open. And now I get this file, Explorer thing on the left that has all the files within it. So when I'm working on a piece of software that I'm building, I like open the folder that has that software in it. And then I've got all the code for it. And then I start coding. And I save the file, and then that's it. Okay. All right, the last piece here that you need is so you should have Chrome. Or if you're into Arc, that's fine. You just need a Chrome-like browser. So the reason that we want to be using the same thing is because we're going to use something in there called Developer Tools, which lets you kind of inspect the page and kind of see what's going on behind the scenes of a web browser. And so we all want to have sort of the same setup there. Because like Safari versus Chrome, the dev tools are just slightly different. And then we need the live server extension. So did anyone not? Trying to think of like what most likely people are going to be honest about. Did anyone not do that? You didn't? Okay. So do you have VS Code though? Okay. So if you have VS Code open, there's this extensions thing on the left over here. This like Tetris looking thing. And you can search for extensions in this, which are just, like little add-ons, and you'll search for live server. And this is the one you want. And you will just install that. I'll explain kind of what's happening when we use live server in just a minute. Okay, but we want to start coding HTML today. I'll start writing HTML today. So wherever you are, you're gonna make a new file. So I'm in day 2 of the curriculum stuff, so that's where I'm gonna make it. So you like click on the folder that you want. You might not have any folders, so you would just like right click just like somewhere in here and go to new file. But I can like make a file within a folder if I want to. So within day 2, I'm gonna right click and do new file. And now I just name the file. The extension is important. It tells it what language you're writing code in. And so I'm gonna name this in class. And we're writing HTML, so it's .html. If we're writing CSS, it's .css. If we're writing JavaScript, it's .js. And then you just hit enter. If you're stuck for some reason or something's going wrong, just raise your hand. Okay. So we want to write HTML. What's like the first thing that I have to do to make an HTML page? Does anybody know? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so doc type. I like never have to do this. We like when we do normal projects nowadays, like we never have to do that. But so I don't even remember it, honestly. It's like some doc type HTML. Or I don't know if that's right. But you don't have to do that. You could start with HTML like that. But typically there's like the doc type thing above it to be proper. Though a browser can usually figure out stuff if you do it wrong. But yeah, technically you'd put the doc type above this. Like that. Because I think that's a folder thing that you made there. Yeah. So make a file in there. Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, you will never like stop using spaces. Spaces are bad. Unless it's like you're writing like text. Notice like none of my file names have spaces in them. None of my folders have spaces in them. So stop using spaces when you're doing files and folders. You'll learn more about that why. It's related to the when you use the terminal. But yeah. So typically you'll see people use like a hyphen for a space, or they'll do what's called like camel casing. So they like additional resources is 2 words, but I made the R capital so that you could see the 2 words. Or you can use a hyphen. You can tell that sometimes I'm in different moods when I'm doing it. No, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead with your question.
I'm just, can you go back over how you got to where you are from I guess once we create the file?
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
not able to, I missed how to get to the editor and type in things.
Okay. So you have VS Code, right?
Yeah,
Okay. So I'm gonna close it. So just close VS Code and then open it again. When you open it again, it's gonna give you sort of this welcome screen. Do you see that?
yeah.
Okay. Then go to File, Open Folder. Or I think you can click like open right here if you wanted to. And then you just want to select wherever you want to be putting your code.
Well, when I opened it again, I'm already in on the left side. It already shows the day 2 folder.
Okay, that's fine. So then you're basically sort of where I am now, where I am now.
Yeah, so I'm asking in reference to the doc type HTML, like the editor.
Yeah. So did you make a file already?
Yes. So
Okay.
after the file, how do I get to the editor itself?
So you would just like click on the file and it should sort of open in like on like where mine is here. Do you like if you click on the file, do you see this?
No, that's
I don't see this
interesting.
until you type that. It'll be just like a blank document.
Did you
Okay,
name it
maybe-
.html?
Yeah, that part. How do I?
So make
Just
sure
rename it. Sorry.
you're good. Yeah, you're good. This is when we need you guys to be together in Tulsa. So make sure that you're making a file and not a new folder. So like I did new file and then just make sure to do
Okay, there. Yeah,
the
that's what
yeah,
I'm
name
asking. Sorry.
dot HTML.
Type test.html.
Well, I'm just doing that to yes, that's fine.
So
Eh.
are you saying in the code folder, there's a module 1 folder and then a day 2 folder and then the file?
Well, this is you don't have to have this structure exactly. That's the structure that our curriculum is set up in.
Mm-hmm.
Just make a file where like wherever you ended up wanting to put your code. So that could be
In the code folder.
in a code
folder?
folder, yeah. And
okay.
just make like a test.html or class.html file, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then what I did after I made that file is I started typing. Now when you're in VS Code, it'll like often it'll like give you hints and suggestions and you can hit like tab and to accept them. That's the same thing if you start using Copilot, but you don't like I have that turned off right now. And so you should as well. But you need to type. So we want to make an HTML document. And so we typed this doc type declaration up here. And then I've got the HTML tag. The main thing that we need is like, I'm not going to do that doc type all the time. I'm just going to do this HTML tag. It's technically wrong, but it will work. What tag do we typically put inside the HTML tag first? There's 2 tags we typically always add.
The
Head,
head.
and what was the other one? Body, yeah. So, head. I have a few extensions installed that do things for me as well. So notice like I typed head and then it auto added the closing tag. Can you guys see that okay, actually? Should I zoom? Okay. So head and then body. So with code, you have to have like laser focus on making sure that you're typing the right thing. Like it has to be exact. It's not capital H head, it's lowercase h head. There's not a space anywhere, right? It's like it's less than character, tag name greater than character. It's not greater than and then less than character. Like it's all exact. And like most of the time, and you'll still do this even when you're very far into your career. A lot of bugs are like literally just a typo. Like you'll be like, this isn't working. I don't know how to code. And then a mentor will come and be like, you just have a capital there or whatever. Or like there's a space or there's like like a parenthesis missing or something like that. Something really stupid. And you'll feel dumb for a second. But you just have to like have like a super focus on making sure that when things are not working, that you just like make sure that everything is exactly typed the right way. Yeah, for sure. So like if I had made any typos here, stuff would break and not work. But so far I think I'm good. If we want to add, you know how when you open a web page in your browser, there's like a name in the tab. How do we set that? Where does title go? Yes. Okay. And then I want to just put a heading on the page. That's all I want to have to start. A big heading, the biggest heading. H1, yeah. And then I can put hello world. You'll see hello world all the time. It's like from a intro to, I think it's C maybe, like one of the early intro to programming books. The first program they wrote just printed hello world. And so like everything that's like new in coding, like when you're doing something for the first time, you'll just see hello world all the time. It's just kind of now you're in on the joke. Okay, so this is like a very basic page, but it's a page. And it's just like any other web page, totally valid. And so we can now like load this page. So if you go to a web page, like if you open your browser and you go to okcoders.com, there's your browser, right? That we're opening and trying to go to a particular place in. That's typically called the client. You then made a request over the internet through the HTTP protocol to a server somewhere that OKCoders is like there's, you know, you look up the IP address for OKCoders, and then that IP address points to a server somewhere. And then that server responds with whatever it is you're asking for based off the URL. And that is always HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it's just sending that back to you. So you're just getting back this big string, like just this huge string that's coming back. And then the browser interprets the string. So the browser knows how to read HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and then like properly load up everything and show something to you. And so if we had deployed this site somewhere, that would be totally valid. And it would just simply respond. There's no CSS, there's no JavaScript. So it would just respond with this HTML. But you would just get, it's just a string, right? So we have like new lines and stuff, and we've indented things. And we've done that just to make it easier to read as a coder. But it's just one long thing of text that's being sent back to the browser. And then the browser interprets it. So we are going to simulate, like when you do that every day online with your browser and then over the internet with a server, we can simulate that same thing locally. So we're going to go to our browser, but then we're going to talk to ourselves. So we're going to run our own server, but it's the equivalent of a server that's somewhere. You guys heard of like AWS or GCP, like Google Cloud or Azure? Like they provide all these like servers that everyone uses to deploy their stuff. So a lot of times if you're making a request over the internet, it's like talking with this like cloud infrastructure somewhere, but it's like an actual server somewhere. Your computer can also be a server. So we're going to be the client and the server in one. And we're going to ask for the code that's at the page that we're going to talk to. And we'll get back this HTML, and then our browser will show it to us. So I'm simply sort of just saying like what we're about to do is like the same thing that happens when you go to a normal web page. And that's what that live server extension is for, is to set up a server for us. Okay. So if you made a file, you can have this in here, what we've done so far. And then you can go to at the bottom right, you should see something that says go live. And you want to make sure that you have your page open and then hit go live. And it starts. and it probably opened up your browser for you. And you can see that we're seeing our heading hello world. And you can see that like there is a URL, just like if you went to okcoders.com, but this one's just slightly different. Sorry, that's probably pretty small. I can't make the URL bigger though for some reason. So the URL says http://127.001, which is all of yours will say that. That's your local host IP address. It's called the loop back address. It means like just talk to yourself. You haven't probably never seen this, but it says :5500. That's the port. Whenever you talk on the internet with HTTPS, it's always port 443. You just don't see it, but it's just like by default uses that port. You can have a bunch of different ports for a server so that you can like listen on more than one, like in more than one, to more than one thing. And then you can see there's like, you're probably, you've seen URLs before. There's like information about what you're looking at on the page. And so this is actually just the folders and then the file. So it's saying module 1, day 2 in class.html. So it's asking for the specific file that we just coded. And then it just received the HTML from the file that we coded and then showed it on the page, which is exactly what happens on any other web page. It receives HTML and then the page shows it. Now it's typically a lot more HTML. It's typically a lot of CSS and a lot of JavaScript, but it's just more of what we just saw. Not anything different. It sounds like people are stuck or something. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, you would just have to change your default browser. But you can also just copy that URL and then paste it in Chrome. Yeah. If you don't want to change your default browser. Yeah. Okay. It should just be opening your default browser then. Is that not your default? Is Safari not your default? Okay. Yeah. Everybody on the call, okay?
I'm good.
Fantastic.
Sweet. Coding on a Saturday morning, it's everybody's favorite thing to do. I think we've got a few people that got stuck here, so I'm just waiting a second. So we'll take a 10-minute break in 8 minutes. So if you're stuck, just wait till that break and we'll get you caught up during that break so I can just plow through what we need to get through real quick and then we can get you caught up. Okay, so this is a very simple website, right? So I actually don't even see the title, but it should, because like oh wait, it's right there. So you see OK Coders. It's pretty small, but here's our heading, hello world, it's there. If you want to like look at what's on a page, you can do it to any page on the internet if you want to. You can look at the code that's being sent to you, and you can do that by opening the dev tools. And so if you go to, let me switch to Chrome real quick, just because I know that's what. Does anyone use Arc here? It's the best browser. It's awesome. Check it out. It's like amazing. Okay, so I'm gonna go to, so the 127.001, there's like a shortcut for it, which is called localhost. And then I think it was 5500. Live server is giving me like it lets me kind of see the folders and files that we're on. And so I'm gonna go to day 2 and then go to in-class.html. So now I'm opening the same thing that we had in the other browser, but in Chrome. Okay, so we can open the dev console. So we go to window, or I always have a shortcut for this. I'm trying to remember what it is. If you actually,
It's view.
okay. So I think you can also go over here to the little like vertical ellipses and then do more tools, developer tools. And there's a shortcut, which is if you're on Mac, Option Command I. And it'll open up this, it might be on the right for you. You can set where you want it to be. It's opening up on the bottom for me. Let me zoom in a tad. There's a few different tabs here. You'll use only 3 of these pretty much all the time. Elements, console, and network. And we're gonna mainly focus on elements for the time being. Network is like the like internet calls, like the HTTP calls. So you can see those if you want to. Console is the JavaScript console, so we won't deal with that till we get to JavaScript. And then elements is like what is on the page. What's the HTML on the page? And it lets you interact with it, and it will sort of highlight what you're interacting with on the page so you can see it. So like, here's our page. You can see HTML tag, and then our head with our title, and then our body, and then our H1. And you can see this says code injected by live server, because whenever we save, it'll like, so we're gonna code, right? So we're gonna like change the code in our file, and then we're gonna save it. But then we want to see those changes on our web page. Well, technically, like you loaded the web page. Just because you change the code doesn't mean your web page changes. Like it received the code and then showed it. And then just because you change the code doesn't mean that it automatically somehow like got it again. So live server, whenever you change the code, has something injected into the browser that lets it know to refresh, basically. So it will actually, like whenever you change your code, it will auto refresh the web page for you. But that's not like a normal behavior. That's something live server is doing for you. That's what this script is here, which you can try to understand this if you want, but you won't be able to for another 2 months probably. So this is JavaScript here though. Okay, but yeah, here's our page. I can hover over and click on different things that I want to see. I can also click this thing right here and then hover over it on the page and click on it, and then it'll show me the code for it. So you get sort of this like 2-way street happening. And it is going to show you some details on it. So if I click on H1, I can then look at the different things that are dictating the way that that thing looks on the page. We'll learn more about what these things mean later. This is all CSS here, but this is the styling that's being applied to make that look the way that it looks. And do you guys know do you guys know the different types of HTML elements? The different display types? Inline, block. Those are the main 2. There's a few more that are kind of fancy. Does anybody know them? It's inline block. And then I think table, and then like a list item is also different. But the main 2 that you need to worry about are block and inline. So H1 is what type? It's block. The reason I know that is if I hover over it, look at what's happening, what it's showing me. Like, what does this mean to you? This like, it's like taking up the whole page. It's like there's like this blue, and then so the blue is the actual like I don't know how to. The blue is the actual like, hey, here's the like content of it. It's taking up the whole width. And then does anybody know what the orange is? Margin, that's correct. So we'll learn about margin and padding. So the dev tools give you a visual way to see what those values are. So you can go to any website you want and look at what's going on. So if we go to the Wikipedia for Tim Berners-Lee, does anybody know who Tim Berners-Lee is? Yeah, Tim Berners-Lee created HTML and the HTTP protocol. So he's considered like the godfather of the internet. Like if you want to see how this page is made, then you can just open the dev console, go to elements. Here it is. This is it. That's the HTML. There's nothing magical beside, like, it's the same thing. It's just more of it. And then I can, click on it and see, okay, how did they, what is this here? How did they make this? So I can go and I can click on that and see, like, it's a p tag, right? Like, which is what you would expect for a paragraph. And then you can see what's in the paragraph. They like bolded or emphasized his name, and then there's a span. So like here's an Ahref that goes to links to the other page. So like it's like what you're learning. It's yeah, every page is built with that stuff. So if you want to see it, you can do that. You can also change stuff if I think I heard you say that. If you can like you can start messing with stuff if you wanted to. Like you can go to the span and change the font size or something if you want to. So we can change it to 100 pixels or whatever, and just change that page, right? So yeah. So a lot of times if you're trying to get something styled a particular way, if you're like trying to get it to look the way you want, a lot of times I'll do it in this thing and then like copy it and put it in the code, just because you can like more quickly sort of change it and see how it looks. Okay. So
Question.
Yeah.
If you change it there on the dev console, does that doesn't change it for everybody, right? That just changes it for your current view.
Correct. Yeah. So that's just for me. And if I refresh the page now, that's gone. Yeah. Yeah, great question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, yeah.
Still. So it's to inspect this code, with web pages, it's amazing way to actually, like, if you want some picture and it's not savable picture, you just go to inspect and just find this picture and just save it from there.
Yeah, so like whenever if you can see something in your browser, then you have access to it.
Yep.
Yeah. So okay, any other questions? Okay, cool. So that's the setup. So like that's like how we'll code from now on. We're simply just opening VS Code, writing our HTML files, running live server, looking at it in the browser. Like that's the name of the game for the next few modules. So make sure you got that working. If you got stuck on anything, then we'll during the break ask for a mentor to help. And then yeah, the rest of the class today, we'll just keep going over some more HTML tags. Cool. All right, see you in about, let's just take a 7-minute break. See you back at 11:10. All right, you guys hear me in Tulsa?
Yep.
All right, let's hop back to it. So we just want to kind of go through a few of the different types of HTML elements that we'll run across. Real quick, let me pull up back to Arc. Let me pull up this. So first, go away. Just the structure of an element. So if we say HTML element, we typically mean like the whole thing. We mean the opening tag, the closing tag, and the content within it. So here's like a div element, right? And we have the opening tag and then the closing tag. Closing tag just being the same name as the opening tag with that slash in front of it. And then, so I mean, that's the basic setup of an HTML element is the tag and the content. So the very basic stuff, that's all you'll see. Some tags have different like configurations or different things you may want to sort of like modify about how it works. And we do that modification through the attributes. So, oh, sorry. So for a link, which is like the like World Wide Web or whatever, the original idea is like these are just a bunch of documents that link to each other. So the like Ahref was like the fundamental like building block of the internet of like just like linking and like linking to other sites basically. So that's what the A tag is for, is to link you to another location, whether that be an entirely different page. So if you think about like the footer of a like a brand or something like that, they'll link out to their Twitter and their Facebook and their Instagram. So those are links just to a completely different website. Or it might just be a link to a different page within your current website, right? So when you visit a website, typically the URL is describing where you are on the page. So if we go to, usually I use Pitchfork as an example, but now they got bought by GQ and I don't know. I gotta find a new example. But so like pitchfork.com, here's the homepage, right? But then if I go to news, it's like a different part of the page or a different part of the site. And so that was a Ahref that I clicked. And it took me to the URL change to pitchfork.com/news. Right. So all that to say, whenever you're using an A tag, it's meaningless for the A tag to just be there by itself. It has to have like a location it's pointing to. And so that's what the href attribute is for, is to tell it where you want to go if someone clicks on it. And attributes pretty much always follow this format where you've got, so we have the opening tag, right? The attribute always goes there. You never put anything in the closing tag. So it goes in the opening tag and you basically just put a space. So like the space means something, right? Like we're putting space because that's not the name of the tag anymore. It's like we want to now put an attribute. And so the attribute name in this case is href. And then we do equals and then quotes and then whatever the value is of the attribute that we want. So attribute is like a key value sort of pair that you have. It's always like that, where it's in quotes like that typically with the equal sign there, no spaces. Right? Um, like you'll be like, yeah, you think so like you'll be like typing and you're like, wait, do I put a space between the equal sign? And you like have to memorize like, yeah, anyways, so no. Or you can look up the documentation or ask ChatGPT. And so here's where we want to go. And then the content here is like what the link will actually say. So whenever you see links from now on, you'll realize like, oh, it says like news. That's what's the content, but the href is like https://pitchfork.com/news, right? So that's the makeup of an element. And you can have more than one attribute. So if there's more than one attribute, how do you think you do that? Like if there was another attribute for the ahref, stays in the opening, and where would you put it? Yeah,
After the, yeah.
with a space, right? Yeah. So you just keep adding spaces basically to keep adding more. It doesn't matter where. Like if you have two tags, the order doesn't matter. So if you have an href as one of your attributes, and then I'm trying to think of, and like you also want to put a class or an ID, right? You could put it before or after, the order doesn't matter. So it could be class equals link href equals Google, or the href could be first. Okay. And then it's not that important to understand this, but it's interesting. Like if you think about an HTML page, it's a big tree with the very, very root of it being the HTML tag. And like everything continues to be just nested. The important thing to know is like how to describe the different relationships that you might see though. So HTML is the root of the whole page, is the first element. And then you've got branches. The body and the head are considered siblings of each other because they're of the same, what people will typically say is like ancestry. So that, but like just levels. So like here's a div, its grandparent is the HTML tag. If you're at the very, very end, you'll sometimes be called a leaf. So these two LIs are called leaves. And so it's sometimes important to be able to talk like that, to be able to say, oh, that's like, this is a sibling of that HTML. Like, so these two siblings share the same parent, which is the HTML tag. And then another thing people say is like this unordered list tag is like a descendant of the body tag. So yeah, the whole page makes up this like cool like tree structure of all this nesting. And the nesting is important because you know, when you get nested inside a element, that changes potentially how you're displayed on the page. So you need to understand not only the element, but also like what is wrapping it. And so like I would like this list item here is being wrapped by the unordered list, or the list item's parent is the unordered list. And like a list item doesn't work unless it has a parent that is either an unordered list or ordered list. So a lot of elements become, it's very important what their parents are. Like a table, for example, it doesn't make sense to use a table row without that table row having a parent that is a table. Okay, so let's start actually coding. So let's add some stuff to our page. What is one of the other headings besides H1? Yep. And then what's the smallest heading? Yeah. H6. Okay. When we're making web pages, with HTML, we're mainly thinking about like the content that we want on the page. And so a lot of content is just text-based. But we also often will do other types of content. Does anybody know like what I might be referring to? Another type of content besides text? Pictures, yeah. So, I mean, most web pages, you'll see text and content, images and videos and audio. That's about it, right? In terms of display of things. There's also then like user interaction and stuff. The main one there, does anybody like there's a starting tag that's used to capture information from a user. Anybody know what tag I'm referring to? Input, but what's a parent of an input? Form, yeah. So we're mainly dealing with displaying stuff, so text, images, audio, video, and then getting stuff from people. And that's usually a form with inputs. And then there's buttons, and then there's links. And that's like, that's it, right? That's all, with all those things, you can make like any web app that you're typically seeing. Now, there's often a lot of CSS involved to make it look awesome. And there's a few other concepts that allow you to do like animations and allow you to do like fancy canvas and fancy CSS stuff to make stuff like do like graphics and things like that. But most of the time in my day-to-day, you know, I'm just like doing divs and forms and showing data, you know, in a table. Okay, so let's do an image. What is kind of fancy, or what is sort of different about image compared to all the other tags we've seen so far?
Self-closing.
Yeah, it's self-closing. It didn't have to be, I don't know. It's you just have to remember that. There's certain things that are like this, maybe not like a super good reason for why. But yeah, it's self-closing, so you don't need the closing tag on it. Usually because like you don't put any content inside of it. I think that's probably the main reason why it's self-closing. What's the other interesting thing about an image? We talked about the different types of display for HTML elements. What display type is image? It's inline, yeah. And what does inline mean versus block? It's gonna put it on the same line, and then what was the second thing? Yeah, so it's just gonna take up, like an inline element only takes up the amount of room it needs to have its content show up. So like if you are doing like a span that has 5 characters in it, and it's only gonna take up enough room to show those 5 characters. So let's do an image real quick. So coders never want to type more than they have to, so like the tag name could have been image, but it's img, just to be able to type less. It's self-closing, but we need, like, this by itself isn't going to do anything good, right? So we need what? Source, yeah. Source is what? Like what concept is it? Like sorry, like sometimes yeah. It's an attribute, right? Source is an attribute. Yeah, so we have source equals and then quotes. Now what we can put here is a link to any image on the internet, and it'll load it for us. And that would be what's called an absolute URL, meaning like it's a fully specified location, including, so it would be like https:// whatever the URL is for the image. If you're building your website, often you have like your own proprietary images, and so you can like load local stuff. So if I had like an image on my computer, I could also load that if I wanted to. And that's what's called like a relative URL. And so I just put like / and then the image name. So if I put an image in my folder here, I can load that image into the page. And I do that by just Let's load up my dog. Let's find Mr. Carl. It's always handy here for me. So I can copy that image and put it. Just next to my code. So it's like a sibling of this file here. And so if I want to load that, I can just say load Carl PNG as the URL, and it'll know to load like it'll look for the file in the current location that I'm in. So you can just do carl.png like that. This is called a relative URL. Go ahead.
I specify the path because it's.
Yep. I could if I put it in the folder above, I could I could specify that one too. It would, I don't want to teach that quite yet because there's a lot more to it, but you would put like // which is like another relative. We'll learn more about that later. But you can load up something locally. If I just do this though, I don't know if we're gonna see it still. Oh yeah, okay. So it's huge. It's annoyingly huge, right? So often you'll see somebody specify more attributes on an image tag besides just the photo itself. Does anybody know what that is? Alt is important to give it like a text. It is related to size, width. So you'll often see people, and you don't have to specify. So there's like width and height that you can specify. But if you just specify width, then it'll just like auto calculate the height for you. So we can say, hey, just make this width like, 300 pixels or something. And you can see the height was dictated based off keeping the aspect ratio correct. So there's Carl. Right. All right, so there's an image, and then yeah, it is good practice to put an alt in case like there's a lot of accessibility stuff on the web for people that are blind or like have that are colorblind and stuff like that. And so an alt will give it like a name, so like best dog Carl. So if someone had a screen reader, it'd be like, hey, here's an image and it's the best dog Carl. Or if the image doesn't load for some reason. Okay. What
I have a
about
question.
Yeah.
Does the order of attributes matter?
no, doesn't matter. So we could switch all these up if I want to.
Okay.
Yep. All right, what about an unordered list? I want to do an unordered list of to do items that I need to do today. What's the first tag?
UL.
Yep. And then you can use UL or OL. And then within there, you do what tag?
LI.
Good. So if you're an OkCoder student, you need to study. You can probably take a break today. You can study tomorrow. Probably need to eat lunch. Relax. So yeah, there's our unordered list. Showing up right there. Very cool. We can also do an ordered list. Best Fans, I don't know. Okay, so we can also do an ordered list, and that one will do numbers for us. You can also specify what you want the bullet to be. To specify a different bullet, does anybody know what I would need to use? An attribute. And then if you don't know, which I don't know off the top of my head, I know it's possible. And so a very common thing is to be, as a coder, is to like always be looking at the documentation. So it's super like a huge part of my time as a coder is looking up stuff. It's not like I memorize everything. And so you're either looking up documentation or more and more nowadays you're asking ChatGPT stuff. So like there's been a huge, like coding is happening a lot faster than it used to because of ChatGPT. So we can look up the documentation. That would have been the old school way. So if we wanted to be like, oh, you know what? Like I want a different bullet thing here for this. I want it to look differently. So you could be like, how do I make the bullet look different for a list, an ordered list or something, or an unordered list? Or you could go look at the documentation for ordered list, right? Most people like the MDN docs for looking up like HTML or JavaScript or CSS stuff. So for example, like on MDN, there is like every tag. You can just like look up every tag if you want to, right? So we can go and find whatever it is that we're wanting to do. So for, let's say, unordered list. Oh, cool. I actually, yeah, I mean, I know this, I think, but like you can keep nesting it. It'll do like, see how it's doing a different bullet in this case automatically for you. So some of the attributes are type. So you can say, hey, I'd rather do square, disc, or circle. You can also, oh wait, sorry, this one's deprecated. You use this list style type. So you can like, yeah, you can do like an image if you want to, disc, circle. So, oh, they want you to do it with CSS now, I guess. Or can I? Let me see. So we can go to our unordered list and do list. Yeah, maybe not. Well, I think we have to do this with CSS now. So I'm not going to do it now because we're not learning CSS quite yet. But to change that style type, it used to be an attribute, but now that's deprecated and they want you to use CSS. Deprecated means like for some reason someone decided they didn't like the way that it was going. And so they have to continue to support that way because if you just stop supporting it, like a bunch of websites would break, but they'll like deprecate it and have a new preferred way of doing it and then like slowly transition everybody over to the new style. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so you would not use it. So you used to be able to do well, so like we can use the deprecated thing if we want to. Let me go to that. So you would do type and we could say disk. And now if we go back to our page, I guess that's disk. Or we could do, see it changed from like the disk to the circle. That is like not preferred anymore. So the preferred way would be to do it with CSS, which we'll learn that next week, or we'll learn that on Wednesday.
Who decides these preferred methods?
Yeah, there's like committees. So there's like a web standard committee. They come out with, so there'll be like, there's an HTML specification, there's a JavaScript specification, a CSS specification, and they come out with different versions. But yeah, there's like a committee that, and there'll be some community driven stuff where like people will start wanting some sort of thing, and then the committee would adopt that thing. But yeah, all programming languages have some sort of, like, programming languages are also code. And so there's like JavaScript has like a repo in GitHub that like we can't get into all this, but like code like compiles down to other code, and then eventually it goes all the way down to being like zeros and ones. And so like JavaScript has new features added to it and new like syntax added to it, and it's sort of evolved over time. What was the original question? Oh, who decides? Yeah, there's like committees of people that decide. Nonprofit committees, typically. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, what is like the generic block element? Div, yeah. So you'll see a lot of divs. It's this generic block element to just group stuff. And then what's the generic inline element? Span, yeah. So we can do. So if you look at these 3 lines of code, how would you expect them to show up on the page when we look at it? So, yeah. Say that one more time. Div, yeah. Yes, yes. So I'm asking like, so div is the generic block level, span is the generic inline. As was mentioned, block will take up the whole thing, the whole width of the page. And then inline will only take up as much content as there is. And the main thing is it won't push anything to the next line. So a block level element will always push something to the next line. So what we'll see is test, and then inline test and inline test 2 will be on the same line. So we go, so you can see that here. So, and this helps to see with our inspector. So we've got test taking up the full width, and then inline test taking up just the content, and then inline test just taking up the content. Okay, so we just went over a few just visual elements, right? So we didn't go over table. But those are just some of the basic content elements. In terms of taking input from the users, we talked about the form. So the form is huge. We want information from people. We want them to type stuff in our websites and click buy and give us their data, right? So we can make a form, and we want to do this top level form element, and then put, as like, you want to group all of the different data you need for that one particular form in one form. And so, that one form might be your username and password to sign in. Or one form might be like your name, your shipping information, and your credit card. And then you would submit all that at once. So basically, like, whatever it is that you then have the submit button for, whatever information is included in that is what you're going to put inside the form. So you'll have a form and you'll have a bunch of inputs. So what are different types of inputs? Button is a type of input, yeah. There's actually, so there's input type submit, which will be shown as a button, and then there's also just buttons as well. I mean, you can kind of use both. What are other types of inputs? Text. So the main basic one is input text. So we can do, input. And then if it's text, how do we specify that? Type text, yeah. So let's make a username password form. So we've got input type text. And that can be our username or email. No one uses username anymore. Email. So if I want this input to be associated with email, what might I have to do that? You would often see an ID, but there's another. What? Name equals email. What if we open the page now, what are we going to see with this form? Just a blank box. If we want it to say email next to it, what do we? Yeah, but it wrapped in what tag? Label. Placeholder works too. Then the placeholder will be like in the input, and then once you start typing, it'll go away. So that's that like doing a label versus doing a placeholder, that's like up to your designer. You don't make well unless you're like you really like front end and you want to be like a you're interested in how stuff looks, then you'll be able to make those decisions. But typically I don't make any decisions about design because if I do, it looks terrible. And so most of the time someone's giving you like, here's how this should look, and you're like coding it, but yeah, should it be in the placeholder? Should it be in the label? Hopefully you don't have to decide that, but yeah, we can add label. And this I find kind of funny, but you put the input inside the label like that. And then you put email like this. Trying to format this the way I want. There we go. So this is how you can put, hey, we want the input for email to be associated with the label for email. So this is just how you do it. You kind of put the input inside the label like that. So now we'll see email : and then the input. So based off what you're seeing here, what type of element display wise is input? Inline, yeah. Because it's not like going to the next line. All right, so we got email. So we just need to sort of repeat that for password. So I'll do that. I'll change the name to password. There's one change you can make here that you'll typically see for passwords. When you type a password in on the web browser, what's different about it compared to a normal text input? Yeah. And like, how do you think we might make that happen with this input?
So attribute for telephone for numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was the last thing said? In this case, there's actually type password. Like they have a type called password. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes when I ask questions, it's like hard to know exactly how to answer. But yeah, there's just type password, and that will automatically do all the cool stuff for you that you need. So now when I type in here, you can see it's doing making it hidden. Now, if you needed, how sometimes you can click show and it'll show it to you. That's not built in. You have to build that yourself. That's not. Okay, so notice our input and the label are inline, right? Because both of our inputs, including the labels, are on the same line. What if we wanted to get email on one line and password on the next line? Break would work, but people say no. Like it's like people don't, they don't want you to put break. You're almost never supposed to put break. It's just like it's a preference thing, but that would work.
A P tag?
P tag would work, though I'd recommend a different tag. What were you saying though? Well, a break is just like a new line. And if you needed your paragraph to have like a break, you could just do a new paragraph.
Probably did.
Div is probably what I would recommend here. To break it up. So basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna wrap everything in a div to then make the stuff inside of it like basically become block level. And so we'll wrap the whole label here in div. So now like this stuff here inside the div is inline, but the div itself is block. So the div is gonna move the stuff to the next line for us. So now we've got 2 lines here. Now I don't love how close these are, but we're not learning how to deal with that quite yet. But to fix that, you would use margin. That's my password. That's Dashlane in my password manager. So that's like, you know how when you go to a site, do you have a password manager? Yeah, 1Pass. So 1Pass will, maybe it doesn't, but you see how I also have 1Password, and so it's adding that icon. So this comes back to, so I have an extension, 1Password. It's modifying my web page. Like 1Password is not somehow in the code that we're writing. It's updating our code in our web browser on the fly. And so it's looking for any input. And then if it's an input, it's like, okay, well, here, I'll put my little icon here so you can click it and I'll fill it out for you. So yeah, we didn't code that in there, but 1Password, the extension, is adding that. Gotcha. Cool. So we're missing something though to be able to actually, like, so we can type in here. Yeah, we need to submit. So typically you'll see a mix of like input type is submit or like button. But so we'll add input type equals submit. I want to. Oh, that's funny. Because like often you want to be able to type what you want in the button name and have it not just be submit. You know, like it might say like continue or something else. If you want to, is input? Yeah, see how our inputs are like doing this self-closing stuff here? Yours just didn't do that? But do you have it just like this basically? Yeah, one of my like extensions is doing that, I think. But yeah, is input self-closing?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want to change the content of the button or whatever for submit, then you would need to use button, and button you can specify like what the text is inside the button.
If you change value on the submit button, it'll change the text.
Like that. Look at that. So you end up wherever you work, you end up having like a particular way that you do things. And we have like built out like our own forms and stuff like that. And so uh we have like a specific button that we use for submit and it's just like all different. So like I've like forgotten the like fundamentals in a lot of cases, you know. Okay, so here we go. We've got that working, so we can put email in here. A lot of times you'll have inputs that are doing like validation and stuff like that, where if you know, that's not a valid email, you all are used to it telling you that typically, like if you mess that up. That's something we'll learn later. We can type in our password and then hitting continue here at this point. Once we do that, and Dashling's reacting to that. Once we do that, you then go into the realm of backend programming because typically you're sending that data. You're taking the email, you're taking the password, and you're sending that to your server. And the server's then validating whether or not that's the correct password for that email. And then it'll send back a response and say, hey, that's correct. Go ahead and log them in. But that's all in the realm of backend programming. So right now when we click continue, nothing's happening. And to learn how to hook it up to do something is what we'll learn later once we start learning JavaScript and stuff. Okay. So we're not going to have enough time for the Wikipedia exercise. What I'd like to do instead, because I don't think it'll take as long, is for you all to, oh, look. What was that? Okay, so that's a good thing to learn. So I had like a weird fragment in the code, but the web page was still working. And so a lot of times web browsers are pretty forgiving. If they see something that doesn't make sense, it'll like just ignore it and continue on and try to render the rest of the page for you. So our website wasn't broken despite having that.
It's like CSS, that's just breaking everything.
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly something you could do that would break everything, but that one was pretty innocuous. Okay. Just look at,
Hi, I have a question.
yeah.
So I guess you were talking about that little notification that pops up, like the MDN thing. Um, one of my label elements is red. I don't know why, because I've like redone it 3 times. I didn't spell anything incorrectly, and it's still telling me like I
Good.
know you said websites are like pretty forgiving, but
Yeah. So this is good. So whenever you guys are having issues or something and you want help, copy your code. So here's all the code that I have, right? So copy all of it. And then go to Slack and say help. And then say what's wrong, right? And then there's a particular way to paste code that makes it easier to read in Slack. So you do 3 backticks. And then it gives you this thing and like that code format thing. And then you paste. And then you hit enter. And it'll make it easier kind of to read for us.
What's a backtick?
It's the thing below escape. Next to 1. You can also
Also known as a
click,
backslash.
you can also click the where is it?
Is that also a backslash?
Backslash.
If you look up on the like where the bold and everything is,
Oh.
the far right, yeah, code block.
Code
Yeah.
block. There's a little code block thing.
Control Shift C.
Yeah. I think you can maybe specify what type of code too, potentially, and it'll
You did the same.
code and code. What's the difference between code and code block?
Okay.
Can I do? Okay, can I tell it? Don't worry about it. Just paste your code there. And then someone will be able to look at it and tell you. You can also paste your code into ChatGPT and say, hey, it's red. Like, why is it red or whatever, you know? And it'll be able to help you. So that's what I'd recommend. Like, you can bother us as much as you want and paste in Slack as much as you want, but also like you can like paste your code into ChatGPT and ask it stuff about it, or say like, hey, I'm experiencing this bug, and it'll probably be able to tell you the answer. But if for some reason it's still not working after what it told you, then paste it in Slack. And if you're not comfortable putting all your code in front of everybody, then you can try your team as well. And actually it's fun. I mean, like trying to help people, like debugging is a huge part of coding. And so reading code and trying to figure out what's wrong with it is a good practice. So giving your teammates a chance to do that can be good for them. Okay, any other questions? Did you post? Oh, so you already got it. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I got it. I was missing
did?
that last little
Just a freaking
bracket
great,
thing. Yeah.
right? Messes the whole thing up. Yeah. Okay. All right, so with the time we have left, if you got stuck on something or whatever, if you're having issues, raise your hand and let's take care of that. But we only have 3 minutes. I usually like to have enough time for like a 10-minute exercise, but it'll just be homework because we only have 3 minutes. And like I said, I don't like going over because I know you guys have lives. So I'll send the information on the exercise and then also the homework for Wednesday. Okay. Tulsa peeps. Reply to what I just posted with like thread. Just put me or just put something so I know that you're in Tulsa, and I'll get you guys invited to a channel. You guys can't make channels in Tucklahoma, right?
You can.
Oh, you can? Who doesn't have a team channel yet? Do you know what teams you're on? So if you're not in a team channel yet, or you're sitting next to your team, right? So just get in there, ask someone to get you in there. And then the Tulsa peeps, you guys have to come up with a team name. Oh, okay. So are you guys the control freaks? Me, but I like my OKC team.
No, I mean, yes, but I don't know if we're all in Tulsa.
So
Right,
I
I'm the
I
only
think
one.
we at least should make a Tulsa channel. If you want to be in 2 teams, that's fine. But let me make just a Tulsa channel real quick. Okay, I'm gonna make this Tulsa channel and get you all invited. And if there's any other questions or anything, just post in Slack. Otherwise, I will see you all on Wednesday.